Well, good morning and welcome to another edition of our Debrief. I have with me two of my good friends, Kyle Wetzler and John Siebert. You guys all know them. I'm David. It's great to be with you. Today we're going to be talking about family as a result of our conversation that Michael started during this sermon in this last week. If you haven't seen it yet, go take a look. A lot of great information in there. Softball question for you guys today. Talking about family. If you could be a part of one fictional family, whose family would you like to be a part of?
Professor Xavier's academic club for the X-Men, that family.
If you can't pronounce it, you don't belong.
I want to be in your family. It would mean I would have superpowers.
Oh, okay.
Plus,
what?
Professor X, he's a good dad.
I'm sorry.
You kind of remind me of Professor X.
Okay. Yeah.
I think I'm going to go old school, and I want to be a part of the Full House family because I'd get to hang out with Bob Saget, Uncle Jesse, Uncle Joey. I mean, those are the three America's dads right there, right? I guess only one was a dad, so Full House.
I mean, if I was going to go, this is the first thing that came to my mind, so don't judge me. If you were around in the late 90s, there was a show that was on called Dinosaurs. And there was a baby in it.
Not the mama.
Not the mama.
Not the mama.
I'm the baby. Gotta love me. I think that was the catchphrase. That's what came to my mind first, so I said it out loud. I don't know if I really want to be part of it, but it'd be interesting.
Well, I thought of if I was not Christian, I'd probably want to be a part of the Soprano family and just be in a crime organization family, like a mafioso. But I'm Christian, so clearly not. I wouldn't want to do that now.
Oh, of course not.
Yeah.
Well, guys, all kidding aside, it's kind of fun to kind of have those questions every now and again. But today we talked about the idea that God has instituted marriage and family as one of the core building blocks of our society. And so we're all a part of a family. We're leaders of our own homes. And so I'm sure we've thought about this a fair bit, especially as we've walked with other families in our church who have a myriad of experiences. Some of you may not be aware out there, when we talk about the idea of the family, it's got a little bit of a complicated history. One because of sin, and another because of our tendency to idolize family. For those of you who don't know, can you guys explain, when we talk about the idolatry of family, what does that look like, and how have you seen it impact evangelical church?
Right, okay. So I was a youth pastor for a number of years, and it was one of the largest issues I faced as a youth pastor, because the families will sometimes worship their children, and what that looks like is the kids run the calendar. So if it's club sports, they're doing the club sports, and they're shuffling kids around. And internally, I'm sure parents are thinking, I love my kids, so I'm doing this for my kid. But what it sometimes will morph into is they live their life vicariously through their children, and their children's success is their success. So there's this weird relationship that gets developed, and in a way, the kids become like a little g God. And so if the kids aren't doing well, the parents aren't doing well. If the kids are struggling, the parents are struggling. And the kid, they cannot hold that weight up.
I want to push into that a little bit. So when I hear a parent saying, hey, Johnny or Susie, because a lot of kids are called that these days, I want to give you as many opportunities as I can. I didn't have what I can offer you now, so I want to give it to you. I'll in fact go into debt to give you what I didn't have. That sounds really good to me. Why is that so wrong? How can that be bad for a kid if you have a parent who's urging you with all they have to succeed?
Well, I mean, if our greatest role as parents and as Christians were to help our children become disciples of Jesus, what are we actually teaching them in that? So when John was saying what we prioritize in our schedule, if we're prioritizing our fourth soccer game or maybe just another trip out of town for family time, and we're always constantly putting the family of God on the back burner, and we only do church in the school year because we can't get away, and Sunday's convenient for church during the school year, but church isn't convenient in the summertime. those types of priorities of what we're instituting and teaching our children. Is the gathering of God around God's word important, or is it, man, we want you to be happy? This week in our staff meeting, we were talking about the different things we see the Apostle Paul pray for the churches, and one of the things he says is that he was praying that the church would be blameless and holy before God. I'm like, I wonder how much we actually spend praying that for our own kids versus, man, we just want them to be happy, which, yeah, of course I want my kids to be happy, but if that's my ultimate goal, I'm going to compromise in a lot of areas that the scriptures would say that I shouldn't. But if I'm desiring them to be blameless and holy and growing in their Christ-likeness, I'm going to have to say, you know what? This isn't as much as their priority as it needs to be.
Right. And to piggyback on that, we're trying to prepare our kids for adulthood. And unfortunately, the family structure is set up in a way it's all about consuming. So the kids are taught, just feed me the vacations and the toys. And then you wonder why when they become 18, 19-year-olds, why they can't stand on their own 2 feet. They haven't figured that out.
Or like, why did you leave the church? Well, what example did we really set for them following in the church? That's always like the big concern of when they go to college or when they grow up that they're going to leave the church. I just asked the question, well, what example did we set for them as they grew up?
Right.
So it's almost like for a family to fall into the idolatry of family, it's to value something that isn't ultimately valuable to God, and to almost buy into the secular version of what success looks like. It's like, okay, if I get my kid a scholarship to X school, his life will be set. Therefore, I'm going to put all my energy there. And you're hoping you're trying to help your kid succeed, but is that really a fundamentally Christian perspective? Not saying it's wrong necessarily to go after scholarships. That's amazing. But what it sounds like is that becomes the main focus, is trying to help your kids succeed according to secular values rather than becoming disciples of Jesus. Does that sound?
Yeah. It's, the principle is, what good is a man to gain the whole world but forfeit his soul? And we're, hustling to give our kids the whole world, but we're sacrificing their soul care. And so that's something that weighs heavily on me as a father as well, thinking about that. I want a childhood and a life for my kids that I didn't have growing up. So sometimes you get into that kind of mindset, and it's a slippery slope.
And there's a lot of motives that can lead to that kind of a pattern of brokenness or dysfunction, where there's some people are feeling guilty because they're not present as they want to be, or they haven't been able to shield their kids from X, Y, or Z. And so it fuels that. So I recognize if you're watching on today and you're stuck in a pattern of just that's your world of trying to just do enough to prove to your kid that you love them. Like, take a break, take a look at what God's values are, and adjust accordingly. It's kind of a tough one. It really is to be an American Christian. Okay, so if there's some possible speed bumps or potholes to avoid with family and making it too significant, but recognizing that God has instituted it as this beautiful blessing, what things do you guys see in the institution that are worthy of celebrating of marriage and family?
Go ahead, bud.
Well, one of the things that I think is worth celebrating, and it's just even the simple, ordinary tasks of time together. So I know we were just saying like all this vacations and all those things are bad, but I think if we save parenting or save the mountaintop experiences as the time that our kids remember us being present, we've missed the boat. Like, I think of the things that light my children up the most is when it's a daily occurrence, when I'm on the ground wrestling, playing, when there's a kid hitting another kid and you need to mediate and, hey, say you're sorry, forgive one another. I think it's just those little moments day to day and where you're able to influence and nudge and remind and show the gospel and teach the gospels to your kids. And so it's not just it's saving and waiting for those huge experiences. It's a day-to-day presence piece. And I think just even as simple as that sometimes, and noticing, when I take my kids for a walk at night and we see a beautiful sunset, just saying like, hey, this is great that we're having time together, but then also look at God's creation and beauty and majesty, and like being able to celebrate the little things that we can do day to day to see that God is at work in those very moments.
It's cool. What can we celebrate about family?
Family, marriage.
Yeah, there's so much. It's hard to narrow it down. I'm thinking about Genesis, and God sets the family up for the cultivation of the garden, and just doing something together. Like a project together. And I think when we tap into that as our family, there's a goal and a mission we're moving towards, and we're gathering our wife and our kids, and we're moving towards that mission or goal or the thing that we set before us, and we're sacrificing and changing and remodeling and all that stuff. That's a beautiful picture of what God intended for His people. To cultivate, to create beauty out of chaos. So we're in the middle of like a home remodel project. And so I've been thinking a lot about this. I'm thinking like Genesis, and like, by the, the sweat of your brow, you bring forth bread from the earth. And I'm like, okay, so there's definitely some of the curses involved in this, but there's also a ton of beauty in it as well. And I think for me personally, I get along best with my wife when we have like something we're moving towards together, like a project to work on. So I've been enjoying that. That's actually been a lot of fun lately.
Yeah, for me, I think one of the things we're celebrating about God's vision of marriage is the unity of diversity that we find in marriage fundamentally, and family, where none of my kids are very similar at all. And they're all dynamic, and they bring out different elements of each other when they're together. And so just recognizing that we don't need to be the complete package, that like I need my wife, I'm incomplete without her. And to see how that complements each other is actually a beautiful thing that doesn't take away.
I think something we're celebrating. You guys both celebrated anniversaries, right?
Yeah.
18 years.
14 years?
I sure hope it's 14. But I mean, I think there's something we're celebrating right there of a commitment of...
Oh, it's been easy.
Yeah, clearly. I've known you long enough to know that that's not true. But I think it's just celebrating even the fact of God's faithfulness in your guys' life individually and in your marriage for that long time. I think that's something worth celebrating, that
right.
You still love your wives, and I think your wives still love you guys, which is
there are days she'd trade me for a ham sandwich, but
oh my gosh.
It's true.
All right, let's move on. Why is family so essential to the future of the church? When you guys think missionally moving forward, what do you think?
The family is a primary place for discipleship. So if someone's going to be a Christian, 20 years from now, it's going to be primarily through the family unit of moms and dads discipling their children. Where the church steps in a unique way, when you look at recent stats of single family homes, is the church then becomes that family for those fractured families. And so in a way, it still completes its mission. It's about the discipleship of that son or daughter, and modeling what it means to be a man or woman of God so that they can walk with Jesus for a lifetime. So there's a quote, I can't remember who it's by, but the church is always one generation away from extinction. And so we have to do our job of raising up and discipling our young people.
I mean, it's just the fact of the matter is, if Michael talked about it in the sermon, that God's design is that child birth would come through it, and that's part of God's design. And the fact that the church is going to grow by two ways: it's birth and rebirth. They always talk about it. So people becoming Christians, but also the little ones being born into the church. I'm not saying that they're saved coming out of the womb, but the church is going to grow that way. And so I even just think of, it's just a wonderful picture of life. The church is made up of a bunch of little home churches of daddy and mommy and son, daughters, and all those types of things. And so if I think about it, the times that I'm not at work, who am I with the most? It's those people. And so that's why it's so important so at least be cognizant of what's going on there.
Okay, let's have a real moment. you okay with this?
Yes.
When you hear that the discipleship of your children is fundamentally your and your wife's responsibility, I got to be real. Like, how does that make you feel? Like, as
Well,
a pastor?
It's interesting because I'm like, what has changed? And what's changed for me is we don't have Awanas in the middle of the week because of COVID. We don't have a traditional Sunday school on Sunday mornings because of COVID. And so there were some things that I wouldn't say I advocated my leadership, but they definitely buttressed my ability to disciple my kids. And I'm feeling more of the pressure now to model that and to be in the Word and things like that. And it's hard.
So
It's really hard. I love my kids, but I'm scraping the bottom of the barrel at 8:30 at night to sit down to do Bible reading with them, because I know they're not, at Sunday school in the same way, and they're not at Awanas midweek, and so I guess it's brought more awareness of like, even with those in place, Lord willing, we those start to operate again in the same way. But even with those in play, my kids need more of me as they get older, not less.
Well,
and I can't count on those things.
how's it going with Felix?
Yeah, well, he'll be 6 months old, so he's going to be preaching his first sermons here. I think, and so I know family committed time to devotions and family prayer is important to those things, but I think it's even finding those little moments. Like, so my oldest will be 6 in December, and she's starting to ask questions about, like she asked me the other day, "Is there a doggy heaven?" It's like different than
Like, this is going to be sad for you.
yeah. I'm like I just turned the movie on All Dogs Go to Heaven and I let that answer it for her. But no, I think it was even finding little moments like that of where I'm able to take a question or something that she's seen and tying it back to something that either Jesus taught on or Jesus exhibited. And so not necessarily looking, we try and establish those times that we have those conversations, but then finding the little moments where I'm like, why are you asking me about doggy heaven? Like, our dog's only 7. She ain't going anywhere anytime soon unless something happens. But it's just interesting, those little conversations that come up and finding opportunities to teach about what is good and what is true and what is biblical with them. That's always there, not just when we have a prayer time or when we open up the Jesus Storybook Bible, those types of things. It's finding those little moments to have that. And do we crush it in my household? Totally not. Like you said, a lot of times it's, we're tired and these conversations are hard,
Right.
But it's a struggle. Like, one of 4 will be interested and the other ones will be like, I don't know. It's been a nightmare for 16 years in our house, and we haven't gotten the corner on the market. I was in a car ride with a buddy of mine, Jordan Handsaker, and we were just talking about bringing up kids and different things we're trying and different rhythms. And he's just like, to be honest, my boys are rowdy. They're little, but I believe that the Bible's going to work, and so I just make a point to read the Bible with them, over them, even if they're playing. And I'm like, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
Because if Scripture is a part of your house, and that's really what Deuteronomy talks about, is as your kids rise up and lay down, and talking about it is so
Find them
significant.
to the doorposts.
I know you're joking about Felix, but one thing that I actually do is when I'm rocking him at night pretty regularly with the Bible app, I'll listen to the Scripture while I'm rocking him. So I'm more thinking of it. It's more maybe even my own devotional time, but who knows what God's going to seep into that little brain of his. I sure hope so, man. It'd be great.
I think
Augustine.
So. I think weaving in, the only advice that I've found to work is weaving it in rhythms, anything you can.
The best advice that an older pastor gave me, I asked him, because all 3 of his kids walk with Jesus. I asked him, what's the silver bullet? He's like, there's no silver bullet, but live your faith in front of your kids. Because sometimes we're like, I'm going to go away from my private quiet time. He's like, sit down and read your Bible in front of them.
Your kids catch you.
Yeah, catch you walking with Jesus and in prayer and reading your Bible, and then they don't separate out the two. I think that's really important.
I think just one last thing. Paul Tripp said something really powerful, is that when your kids get in trouble, those are the moments where the gospel is most palpable, and you can be the most effective in being a gospel agent of change in their life. And so that's been a challenge, but it's been so powerful.
A lot of Tripp stuff has been helpful for my wife and I as we've navigated this. And, he's got the whole thing of give them grace, that whole mantra. And it's so funny. My oldest now has learned how to weaponize this when she's in trouble and she's just crying, why aren't you giving me grace?
That's funny.
All right, last question. We're talking about family, just how beautiful it can be as we do our best to kind of interweave God's structure and plan into our homes. But let's be practical. Hypothetically, I'm 26 years old. I've been single, never been in a long-term relationship. My parents live in another state, and I got sick last week. Nobody knew, and I'm just taking care of myself. I don't have this family. So what's the best way for me to actually engage with God's blessing? Am I just out of luck? Or what would you guys advise for someone in that position?
So join a small group. One of the greatest gifts our church has to offer our community and the world is the nuclear family is kind of struggling, but the church then gets to be a unique place where the family becomes a surrogate family in a way. And that was one of the biggest draws for me to becoming a Christian, was there was this family that was inviting me into their home, like, come over, have dinner with us. And there was a period in my life where I kind of like couch surfed around people's homes for 6 months to a year in this little church family that I adopted me. And I model my relationship with my wife and my kids based on these marriages that I watched as a young man. So I would say get plugged into a life group, or join a life group that's got older couples in the mix, or no couples, or young adult ministry, or whatever. Just get into a group and have them be your family.
Well, I think there's that piece, because I experienced something similar. Like, it was people inviting me in and showing me what that looks like as being the first believer in my family. So that's the one hand, that young guy stepping into it, but it's also for our families to say, have your doors open.
Yeah.
We have to see our opportunity to minister and disciple, and inviting other people in. Like, what people need is not just to see our rock star moments on a Sunday. They need to see on Tuesdays when we get short with the kids at the dinner table and have to then come back and ask for forgiveness. And so I think it's both end. The younger person saying, I'm going to take a step out in faith and join something, but it's also those who maybe have those abilities to open up their door and extend their dinner table a little bit further to bring somebody in. That's it's so necessary, needed. I mean, that's if you are without family and you're in the church and that's how you feel, that just breaks my heart, because that's the one primary thing that the church is supposed to be there for people, is a place for them to feel welcome and wanted in. So.
So as we're closing up here, I think it's just the takeaway that I really want to encourage you, whether you're displaced from your own biological family, you are made to be in community with people who know you, love you, embrace you, and walk through life with you. Some of you are in the position where you need to find that today. Others of you have a marriage, and you're trying. You're trying to honor Jesus, and you either need to find a mentor couple that you look up to. They're not perfect, but you invite into your life. And you need to find that person who needs to be adopted by your family, because more and more we're having single people growing up in a world where if they don't find a place in the family of God, then the world has got wide open arms. And so I'd encourage us as a family, some of you, to just embrace those people who are displaced and allow God's thriving blessing to come through his designed family. Hope you guys have a great day. Thank you, gents, for your input today. Really, really helpful stuff. Feel free to share this with people that you think may need to hear this information about family and life together in the kingdom. Take care. We'll see you again next time.